Right there YouTubers, and welcome to another air rifling for beginners, and today we're going to tackle a very emotive subject, and that's the subject on whether I should choose a Springer or a PCP as my first rifle. Now, if you've been following the advice and going onto the forums, I am sure you've noticed all of the threads of people talking about it. And you're never going to get a consensus on this. Never ever. It's like asking what football team does people support. It's just going to go round and round and round. So expect the comments to get a little bit heated below, but please just use your common sense. Take the facts, the knowledge. Bear in mind that a lot of people have a lot of preferences on here, and what I want to do in this video is keep it as simple as possible. That's the whole point of these videos. And to actually explain the key facts between the two types of rifles. Hopefully then you'll be able to come to your own conclusion as to which is best. I will give some of my own personal experiences in there as well. But without that, let's see how we go with this and let the flame wars begin. So, what is an air rifle? That's where you've got to start really. What is an air rifle? Well, here we have a paper tube, and here we have a piece of tissue. Put that in the end, that's my projectile. And missed as usual. But that is a basic air rifle. That's how it works, a projectile, and your accelerant is the air. And that's how air rifles work. Now, there are many different ways and different types of air rifles, but by far the two most common are the PCP, and PCP stands for Pre-Charged Pneumatic. Pneumatic starts with a P, hence PCP. And your Springer, or a break barrel rifle. So these are the two common types that you will get. So how do they operate? Well, ultimately, any air rifle has to store air or project compressed air onto a pellet to make it fly out at the end of the barrel to kill things or to hit a target. That's pretty much how they work. So let's take the Springer first. How does a Springer work? Right, a Springer basically has the barrel as such, and the way that it works is you pre-tension a spring inside, hence the reason it's called a Springer. There is a great big spring in here, and what we're doing is we're pulling that spring and locking it in place under compression. And that is attached to a piston. And that piston, basically, when you pull the trigger, flies forward and compresses the air in front of it through a small hole, which gives you compressed, charged air, which then propels the pellet forward. So it's like, for example, with my tube here, if I just blow into it like so, not a lot happens. But if I compress the air, the gap, and I give it a bit of a spit and go, then it goes faster. It's exactly the same principle. That's how these work. So, quite simply, these are manual driven. Normally you break the barrel. There are some underlever ones, but we'll just keep it nice and simple, break barrel. Put your hand on, bit of a hit on it sometimes, and pull down. Now, whenever you're doing this, always keep hold of the barrel, because sometimes they may go off on their own. And you hear that click that happened there? That was the spring locking into place. So there's a lot of stored energy in here. And what's happened is the piston has come down and is locked into place. And then what will happen when you hit the triggers? It will fly forward, compress the air in front of it, push it through a tiny hole, which will basically then fire out the pellet. Also, make sure you keep your fingers away from the trigger, because if you press that trigger now, you will release the spring. This section will come flying up, smack me in the head, and I'll be taking a trip to accident and emergency. Right, so that is cocking it. Now, you should never fire a Springer with nothing in the barrel, because what you're going to end up doing is releasing all the tension of that spring. It's going to come flying forward. That air is going to get compressed through the small hole, and it's going to meet nothing. And there is no resistance, and what happens is you're just going to damage the spring as it flies forward to do that. So that I can fire this indoors, and you should never fire indoors unless you've got a proper indoor range with pellets, but I'm going to use a cleaning wad. Now this is just a very small piece, oops, I should be holding the barrel, done it again, should be a very small piece of cleaning wad here, and basically I'm just going to put that into the end of the barrel. like so. Let's get that in there, and keep your fingers away from the working mechanisms, all of these the catches in here, because it will break your fingers. And we'll just close that up like so, and my safety catch is on, and there we are. We have a loaded weapon now. Now this spring in here is under tension. It's going to fly forward with like a plunger, and it will push all the air, compress it in the cylinder inside, fire it through that small hole and fire out the projectile. So safety catch off, lean forward and fire. And that is the basic principles of a Springer. Now because there is a big spring in there that is flying forward, every force has an equal and opposite reaction. You're going to get a bit of a jolt, or what we call a recoil on there. And that's it, one shot. If I want to take another shot, I have to go through the same procedure again to take each shot. And that is the basic workings of a Springer. All of the other ones under lever, they work in exactly the same way. So we'll put that to one side for the moment. Okay, pneumatics next. So basically pneumatic means air. See, charged, pre-charged pneumatic rifle, that's what this is. So how does it all work? Well, exactly the same mechanisms we've got going on here. We have a trigger, we have the action at the back here in the case of a bolt, we have our barrel, but you notice the big difference, it looks like we've got two barrels. But actually this bottom part here is a compressed air cylinder. And effectively this is like walking around with a reserve of air, and that this is stored in here. So what it basically means is that I can cock the weapon, fire the shot, cock the weapon again, and I take air out of this cylinder, I charge it into a separate cylinder at the back of the pellet, and every time I pull the trigger that piece of air is released, and that's what fires the pellet, like so. And again, this weapon has no pellets or anything in it. Now unlike a Springer, you can fire this when it's got nothing in it, because there's no massive great big spring flying forward. All you're doing is just releasing air down the barrel. So cock it and fire, cock it and fire. And I can keep doing that as long as I have an air reserve in this tank at the bottom. And that is the basics of a pneumatic or PCP rifle. Now, because this is an air reserve, then I need to fill it, and I keep it filled up. And to do that, they all have a mechanism of filling them. And this one, you take it off at the front. Now, you can plug an attachment on and use a big stirrup pump and pump up and down, and trust me, you do not want to be doing that. So generally what you'll do with a PCP is you'll get what's called a dive bottle, like so. And your dive bottle, we'll just lie this down here, and you will connect it up through a high pressure hose onto your rifle like so, and that's connected. Now these will have a fill pressure, and this one here is 207 bar, it's written on the other side of here. Sometimes they come with a fill gauge to tell you how much pressure's in them. This one doesn't, so I have to use the dive bottle, and we basically fill the rifle up to the required pressure. Once we've got the required pressure, we release the pressure in the hose, because if I try and take this off with pressure in the hose, I'm going to hurt myself. Take it off like so, and now I'm free to remove the attachment, discard my bottle, and put my cap back on. And my rifle is now good for, in this case, another 60 to 70 shots. So that's the concept of a PCP. Now obviously you can see some massive benefits there. Number one, you're not having to break the barrel all the time. And number two, generally what you're going to get with this is multi-shot capability. You can get PCPs in single shot as well, but generally you're going to have a magazine on here for multi-shot capabilities. So that is the principal differences between a PCP and a spring rifle. So what should you get? Well, let's go through some of the pros and the cons of the two. Okay, so let's go through the Springer first. Okay, pros. They are quite simple, not a lot to go wrong with them, other than just regularly every couple of years or so making sure that the spring is in good working order, lubed up, etc., which isn't much of a job to do. Number two is they're very, very cheap. You can pick up a very, very nice brand new Springer for anywhere from £200 upwards to £300, £400, £500. Obviously, the more exotic rifle you want to go for, the more it costs. But you can pick, this one was brand new, this is a BSA Tactical Lightning, and this was, I think you can pick these up for £200. Tin of pellets, a bit of arm power, and away you go. That's it. You don't need anything else with that. Whereas a PCP is a lot more technology and generally a lot more expensive. So PCPs, you're looking anywhere from £400 up to a couple of £1,000. Plus also with the PCPs, ideally you're going to need a dive bottle. And these aren't cheap either. These can be, depends where you get them. This one's about £100 brand new. And then of course you need the attachments and everything to go with it. I've got one twice the size of this, and it was about £180 all in. So there's an extra expense you got there. And of course you've got to go and find somewhere to fill this. So you've got to go and track down your local dive shops that will do it. And keep the tank regularly tested to make sure it's safe. So there is one of the other problems is cost is certainly a big factor here. But I think one of the biggest ones is the fact is that newbies, beginners, generally get a little bit put off at times because of they're not hitting the target as often as they would like to in as tight a group as they want. And you'll find a lot of people will be asking, should I go PCP or should I go, which is more accurate? Right, well it's quite simple really. If you are a newcomer, the PCP will be the most accurate. Simple as. And let me explain why. If you're shooting lying down, which is probably the first way that you're going to learn to shoot, with a break barrel, you've positioned yourself, you've got yourself in a nice steady place, you're aiming all correctly, you've got your breathing, you take your one shot, and then you've got to get up, cock the rifle, and go through the whole process again. In other words, the whole of your positioning is going to change every single shot, which was going to lead to inaccuracy. Whereas a PCP, you can be lying down, you can pull, fire the shot, and do this all from a lying down position. So that is definitely a massive advantage for a PCP as well. You'll find that your grouping, your consistency, especially at the early days, will be so much better with one of these. However, they cost. However, I would also go on the flip side and say that a Springer will teach you the valuable basics of positioning, breathing, and how to aim, etc. And of course it's much cheaper to go with that as well. So at the end of the day, when people have become really good shots, and this is where a lot of the arguments on the internet come from, people saying, well, PCPs versus Springers, these are people that are very experienced. I can give this Springer to a very experienced person and he will shoot it just as good as he will with a PCP. Yes, it will take him longer to fire 10 shots off. Yes, he'll have to position himself and think about it more. But at the end of the day, in the right hands, it is just as good, all things being equal. So, as a newcomer, which one should you pick? Well, a lot of it comes down to personal preference. It also comes down to cost. For example, to pick up a decent PCP with all the accessories that you need to go with it, you're probably looking in the £500 to £800 range. Whereas for a Springer, you can pick up a Springer, a good quality Springer like this, you can pick one up for a couple of £100, maybe £300 brand new with a scope. Springers teach you the basics. They teach you positioning because you're having to change your position every time you want to cock the rifle to take a shot. They teach it, they drum it into you. To be good and consistent with a Springer, you need to be thinking all about that. It is much easier to be consistent with a PCP. Much easier because you're not having to change your position. You can get tighter grouping. So for target shooting, of course, lots of people love PCPs for target shooting because they can keep the position, cock, fire, cock the rifle, fire. Whereas a spring rifle, yes, there are competition levels for Springers, but generally you will find that target shooters aren't really aiming at the Springers. Hunting wise, well, you should never really go hunting until you can know that 99% of the time you can hit a target smack in the centre of where you're aiming, i.e. in the head for a good clean kill shot. But what a PCP does allow you to do is have follow-up shots very quickly without having to break the rifle, make so much noise, etc. So there are pros and cons between the two. Personally, if it was me, I would probably recommend for a newcomer to the sport to go and get a Springer. The chances are you're going to be wanting to shoot it at a range, or more than likely, let's be honest, in your backyard. The chances are you don't know too much about air rifles, and unless you're made of money, the chances are you don't want to spend too much because you're not sure if you're going to actually enjoy this sport. And a Springer is a perfect combination for that. It teaches you the basics of aiming, it teaches you the basics of air rifling, of course the safety aspects as well. And if you do like the sport, the chances are you will keep it and treasure it like I do, because this was my first ever rifle, even though I hardly ever use it now and I use my PCPs. So my recommendation is probably brand new to the sport, go for a Springer. Later on, upgrade to a PCP once you know you like the sport and you're happy with it. But as always, ask in the forums. But like we said, this is an extremely emotive subject. A lot of people have many different arguments on there. Try not to listen too much to it all. Take the points out of it and see what's best for you. At the end of the day, get both if you want to. Anyway, thank you for watching this episode. I hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you next time on the next video for beginners. Bye bye.